Okay, they fail. They fail. Easy victims. They fell easy victims to the ambush. Riding in the failing light of the dismal day, beneath thick trees whose branches dripped water monotonously, and whose fallen leaves obscured even the sound of their own horses' footfalls. Each was lost in his or her own gloomy thoughts. None heard the galloping of hooves or the ring of bright steel until it was too late. Before they knew what was happening, dark shapes dropped out of the trees like huge, terrifying birds, smothering them with their black cloaked wings. It was all done quietly, skillfully. Um, um, dripped water monotonously, and those fallen leaves obscured even the sound of their own horses' footfalls. Each was lost in his or her own gloomy thoughts. None heard the galloping of hooves or the ring of bright steel until it was too late. Before they knew terrifying birds, smothering them with their black cloaked wings, it was all done quietly, skillfully. One clambered up behind Raistlin, knocking the mage unconscious before he could turn. They were birds? Another dropped from the branch beside Chrysania, clasping his hand over her mouth and holding a point of his dagger to her throat. But it took 3 of them to drag Caramon from his horse and wrestle the big man to the ground. And when the struggle was finally over, one of the robbers did not get to his feet. Nor would he ever again, it seemed. He lay quite still, his head facing the wrong direction. Necks broke, reported one of the robbers to a figure, hello, who came up, after all was over, to survey the handiwork. Neat job of it, too, the robber commented coolly, eyeing Caramon, who was being held in the grip of 4 men, his big arms bound with bowstrings. A deep cut in his head bled freely, the rainwater washing the blood down his face. Shaking his head, trying to clear it, Caramon continued to struggle. The leader, noticing the bulging muscles that strained the strong, wet bowstrings until several of the guards apprehensively, shook his head in admiration. How are you? I'm good. Have ever an Eiffel Tower pulled on you? What does that mean? An Eiffel Tower? I'm reading the person's chat comments. Caramon, finally clearing the fuzziness from his head and shaking the blood and rainwater from his eyes, glanced around. Wait, hold on. So this has nothing to do with anything, does it? Neat job of it, too, the robber commented coolly, eyeing Caramon, who was being held in the grip of 4 men, his big arms bound with bowstrings. A deep cut on his head bled freely, the rainwater washing the blood down his face. Shaking his head, trying to clear it, Caramon continued to struggle. the leader, noticing the bulging muscles that strained the strong, wet bowstrings until several of the guards looked at them apprehensively, shook his head in admiration. Caramon, finally clearing the fuzziness from his head and shaking the blood and rainwater from his eyes, glanced around. At least 20 or 30 heavily armed men stood around them, looking up at their leader. Caramon breathed a muttered oath. This man was easily the biggest human Caramon had ever seen. His thoughts went instantly back to Rog and the gladiator arena in Istar. Part ogre, he told himself, spitting out a tooth that had been knocked loose in the fight. Oh no. Remembering vividly the huge ogre who had helped Arak train the gladiators for the games, Caramon saw that, though obviously human, this man had a yellow, ogreish cast to his skin.
Just 5 minutes.
Okay. And the same flat-nosed face. He was larger. Right here. Must be okay. Where is it? Come on. Remembering vividly the huge ogre who helped Arak train the gladiators from the games, Caramon saw that, though obviously human, this man had a yellow, ogreish cast to his skin, the same flat-nosed face. He was larger than most humans too, towering head and shoulders over the tall Caramon, with arms like tree trunks. But he walked with the odd gait, Caramon noticed, and he wore a long cloak that dragged the ground, hiding his feet. Having been taught in the arena to size up an enemy and stretch out every weakness, Caramon watched the man closely. When the wind blew aside the thick fur cloak that covered him, Caramon saw in astonishment that the man had only one leg. The other was a steel peg leg. Noticing Caramon's glance at his peg leg, hard, the half-ogre grinned broadly and took a step nearer the big man. Reaching out a huge hand, the robber patted Caramon tenderly on the cheek. "I admire a man who puts up a good fight," he said in a soft voice. Then, with startling swiftness, he doubled his hand into a fist, drew back his arm, and slugged Caramon in the jaw. The force of the blow knocked the big warrior backward, nearly causing those who held him to fall over too. "But you'll pay for the death of any man, of my man." Gathering his long fur cloak around him, the half-ogre stumped over to where Chrysania stood, held securely in the arms of one of the robbers. Her captor still had his hand over her mouth, and though her face was pale, her eyes were dark and filled with anger. Yikes. So if there are half-ogres, that would mean that somewhere an ogre made love. Scary. "Isn't this nice?" the half-ogre said softly. Hopefully she liked to pleasure herself with a lot, like a wicked witch with like a really big broom, you know? "A present, and it's not even Yule." His laughter boomed through the trees. Reaching out, he caught hold of her cloak and ripped it from her neck. His gaze flicked rapidly over her curving figure, well revealed as the rain soaked instantly through her white robes. His smile widened and his eyes glinted. He reached out a huge hand. What does this do? Let's see. The funniest glitch or bug you've ever seen? Okay, I'll answer that. How do I... Okay, I'll start it. Here's my Q&A. There. So the funniest glitch or bug that I've ever seen, that would have to be, I was a child and I was playing Super Mario Brothers. You ever played Super Mario Brothers? We were playing Super Mario Brothers, and there's this moment where, okay, you could, if you were in the dungeon in like the second level, or the dungeon levels are, I think this one was particularly 4-2. If you break a couple bricks and then like shrink yourself and then go back to, you like go to the edge of the screen, so there's just a little bit, so it's almost gone, and then you go back to where you broke, you'll get like every time you jump you go up a little bit because you went to the edge of the screen so much that it'll catch you, and then you'll get stuck. So you break a couple bricks, and then you go to the edge of the screen, and then you keep going until it's at the edge of the screen, and then you go back and it jumps up. And then if you're shrank, then you get stuck, and you can't do anything. And so when this happened, we were stuck, and we were like laughing so hard, we started to piss ourselves. Because we were that young. Do you remember being that age? Where it's like, I don't know, how old is that? 5 or 7 or something? Yeah, couldn't hold it in. It just came out. I actually pissed myself. And I didn't piss myself at first. We were just laughing really, really bad. And then we were trying to get him freed, and then he walked through the walls. And then this has ended up being like a trick that you can actually do all over the place. If you know that game and how to walk through the walls, you just need to be like, well, at the edge of the screen or whatever, and then you'll go through the bricks. If you jump up enough times away from the wall so that you go like back into the wall, and then you'll like go through the wall. So as we were going through the wall, I pissed myself at that point. I don't remember pissing myself that often. I think I did it when we used to put my stuffed animal, Pink Baby, up on the fan. And I'd turn the fan on and she'd go flying off. I have a song about that. The Pink Baby and Hoopity Hopper. I said, put the baby on the fan. And then there's the time when I was making myself talk. And I was naked. And it was back like, diaper days or something. I can't remember. Like, I was just barely getting out of diaper days, so it was like pretty normal to be like hanging out, without pants on. But I started making him talk. Like he had a mouth. And I said, "Hey, look." My brother came up, and I was like, "I'm Donald Duck." I had him say, and then I pissed so hard that I peed all over myself. I just started peeing on myself. Okay. So, anyways, there's my Q&A. I've answered the question. Any of you know an answer to this? Okay. No. Scared everybody away. Okay. Where am I? What is that over there? Kind of want to check it out. Anyways, so with this half ogre, where did I? Oh wait, it said she was beautiful. Uh-oh. Gathering his long fur cloak around him, the half ogre stumped over to where Chrysania stood, held securely in the arms of one of the robbers. Her captor still had his hand over her mouth, and though her face was pale, her eyes were dark and filled with anger. This isn't nice. Isn't this nice? The half ogre said softly. A present. And it's not even Yule. His laughter boomed through the trees. Reaching out, he caught hold of her cloak and ripped it from her neck. His gaze flicked rapidly over her curving body, well revealed as it rain-soaked instantly through her white robes. His smile widened and his eyes glinted. He reached out a huge hand. Chrysania shrank away from him, but the half-ogre grabbed hold of her easily, laughing. Why, what's this bauble you wear, sweet one? He asked, his gaze going to the medallion of Paladine she wore around her slender neck. I find it unbecoming. Pure platinum, is it? He whistled. Best let me keep it for you, dear. I fear that in the pleasures of our passion, it might get lost. Ew. Caramon had recovered enough by now to see the half-ogre grasp the medallion in his hand. There was a glint of grim amusement in Chrysania's eyes, though she shuddered visibly at the man's touch. A flash appeared, white light cracked through the driving rain. The half-ogre clutched at his hand, drawing it back with a snarl of pain. He released Chrysania. There was a muttering among the men, standing watching. The man holding Chrysania suddenly loosened his grip, and she jerked free, glaring at him angrily, and pulling her cloak back around her. The half-ogre raised his hand, his face twisted in rage. Caramon feared he would strike Chrysania, when at that moment one of the men yelled out, "The wizard, he's coming through." The half-ogre's eyes were still on Chrysania, but he lowered his hand. Then he smiled. Well, witch, you have won the first round, it seems. He glanced back at Caramon. I enjoy contests, both in fighting and in love. This promises to be a night of amusement all around. Giving a gesture, he ordered the man who had been holding Chrysania to take her in hand again, and the man did, though Caramon noticed it was with extreme reluctance. The half-ogre walked over to where Chrysania lay upon the ground, groaning in pain. Of all of them, the wizard's the most dangerous. Bind his hands behind his back and gag him, ordered the robber in a grating voice. If he so much as croaks, cut out his tongue. That'll end his spell-casting days for good. Why don't we just kill him now? One of the men growled. Go ahead, Brack, said the half-ogre pleasantly, turning swiftly to regard the man who had spoken. Take your knife and slit his throat. Not with my hands, the man muttered, backing up a step. No. You'd rather I was the one cursing? No, wait. No. You'd rather I was the one cursed for murdering a black robe. Black robe? The leader continued, still in the same pleasant tone. You'd enjoy seeing my sword hand wither and drop off? I didn't mean that, of course, Steel Toe. I wasn't thinking. That's all. Then start thinking. He can't harm us now. Look at him. Steel Toe gestured at Raistlin. The mage lay on his back, his hands bound in front of him. His jaws had been forced open and a gag tied around his mouth. However, his eyes gleamed from the shadows of his hood in a baleful rage, and his hands clenched in such impotent fury that more than one of the strong men standing about wondering uneasily if such measures were adequate. Perhaps feeling something of himself, Steel Toe limped over to where Raistlin lay, staring up at him with bitter hatred. As he stopped near the mage, the smile creased the half-ogre's yellowish face, and he suddenly slammed the steel toe of his peg leg against the side of Raistlin's head. The mage went limp. Chrysania cried out in alarm, but her captor held her fast. Even Caramon was amazed to feel swift, sharp pain contract his heart as he saw his brother's form lying huddled in the mud. That should keep him quiet for a while. When we reach camp, we'll blindfold him and take him for a walk up on the rock. If he slips and falls over the cliff, well, that's the way of things, isn't it, men? His blood won't be on our hands. There was some scattered laughter, but Caramon saw more than a few glance uneasily at each other, shaking their heads. Steel Toe turned away from Raistlin to examine with gleaming eyes the heavily laden pack horse. We've made a rich haul this day, men, he said in satisfaction. Stumping back around, he came to where Chrysania stood, pinned in the arms of her somewhat nervous captor. A rich haul, indeed, he murmured. One huge hand grasped Chrysania's chin roughly. Bending down, he pressed his lips against hers in a brutal kiss. Trapped in the arms of her captor, Chrysania could do nothing. She did not struggle. Perhaps some inner sense told her this was precisely what the man wanted. She stood straight, her body rigid, but Caramon saw her hands clench, and when Steel Toe released her, he could not help but avert her face, her dark hair falling across her cheek. You know my policy, men, the Steel Toe said, fondling her hair coarsely. Share the spoils among us. After I've taken my cut, of course. There was more laughter at this, and here and there, some scattered cheering. Caramon had no doubt of the man's meaning, and he guessed, from the few comments he heard, that this wouldn't be the first time spoils had been shared. But there were some young faces who frowned, glancing at each other in disgust, shaking their heads, and there were even a few muttered comments, such as, I'll have naught to do with the witch, and I'll soon bed the wizard. I'd sooner bed the wizard. Witch. There was that term again. Vague memories stirred in Caramon's mind. Oh, this is disturbing. They're gonna stop them, right? Definitely gonna stop them. It's Dragonlance. Horrible. There was that term again. Vague memories stirred in Caramon's mind. Memories of the days when he and Raistlin had traveled with Flint, the dwarven metalsmith. Days before the return of the true gods.
Caramon shivered, suddenly remembering with vivid clarity the time they had come into a town that was going to burn an old woman at the stake for witchcraft. He recalled how his brother and Sturm, the ever-noble knight, had risked their lives to save the old crone, who turned out to be nothing more than a second-rate illusionist. But Caramon had forgotten until now how the people of this time viewed any type of magical powers, and Cressania's clerical powers in these days, where they were no true clerics, would be even more suspect. He shuddered, then forced himself to think with cold logic, burning with a harsh death, but it was a far quicker one then. Bring the witch to me. Steel Toe limped across the trail to where one of his men held his horse. Mounting, he gestured, then followed with the others. Oh, that's horrible. The way they worded that, you know? Was it the horse? Cressania's captor dragged her forward. Reaching down, Steel Toe grabbed her under the arms and lifted her onto the horse, seating her in front of him. Grasping the reins in his hands, his thick arms wrapped around her, completely engulfing her. Well, it's a good thing they answered my question. It was the horse. Cressania staring straight ahead, her face cold and impassive. Does she know? Caramon wondered, watching helplessly as Steel Toe rode past him. The man's yellowish face twisted into a leer. She's always been sheltered, protected from things like this. Perhaps she doesn't realize what dreadful acts these men are capable of committing. And then Cressania glanced back at Caramon. Her face was calm and pale, but there was a look of such horror in her eyes, horror and pleading, that he hung his head, his heart aching. She knows. The gods help her, she knows. Someone shoved Caramon from behind. Several men grabbed him and flung him, head first, over the saddle of his horse. Hanging upside down, his strong arms bound with the bowstrings that were cutting into his flesh, Caramon saw the men lift his brother's limp body and throw it over his own horse's saddle. Then the bandits mounted up and led their captives deeper into the forest. The rain steamed down Caramon's bare head as the horse plodded through the mud, jouncing him roughly. The pommel of the saddle jabbed him in the side. The blood rushing to his head made him dizzy, but all he could see in his mind as they rode were those dark, terror-filled eyes pleading with him for help, and Caramon knew with sick certainty that no one would come. Yikes. That was scary. So, I didn't do any kind of comparing myself to anything during that. In fact, no thoughts were sent to me to do that. Like, I'm usually just kind of measuring my thoughts and then just doing that. Maybe it's because I thought things were going on that weren't going on. I overreacted, and I freaked the hell out. I freaked out because of lag, or I thought my email was blocked or something like that, because when you do the read receipt request or whatever, you get this error message. Like, what the hell is this? Freaked me out. So, and then they just had this thing that was like rape scenario, scary. And so it was like, maybe it was like wanting me to realize that that didn't happen. She probably just thought I was crazy or something, and I don't know, thought I was lying, thought I was crazy. Oh well. When I look at some of the things I posted, definitely looks crazy. Like I had to clean up everything. I've had to do that every once in a while. Go through my stuff and go, oh crap, here's something that I posted. I was having a panic attack or something. But more than that, sometimes I just share a lot and I'm like really tired, I'm not really thinking. And then, then the next time I come across it, I'm like, oh my gosh, what the heck? But I mean, I have like a lot of channels. I've done that. You can tell in the crazy stuff I'd share that it was just like post-traumatic stress syndrome or something, just stress and freaking out. But okay, so anyways, that also made me realize how people would have read this book somewhere like jail or prison. And then they would have possibly fantasized about Palm Beach thanks to me and what I was sharing. That's really disturbing. But a person can't really stop a person from doing that. That kind of things can happen anyways. That's still disturbing. Okay, so my email works. And she's not being raped. Right? No, I mean, I know that they do this though. Facebook workers do this. I know that they do. They've already done it to me before her. Because the hottest girl always, because I'm the one who has the best chance with the hottest girl in the area. I know that they do this to me. I know that they do it. They will do stuff like block her or block me, like when it matters. Potentially, if they can get away with it. If they can get away with it, it's possible. It's probably not going to happen, but it is possible. But I mean, with what happened at Facebook, I mean, part of that was my ex-girlfriend. She's so stupid. But she did that for the purpose of cutting them off. Horrible. I mean, at the time she did it, she lied. She told me she needed money from her mom, and she got it. She got $600 from her mom, making up lies about me. Stupid. And then I don't know. And I think she was scared because she lied in paperwork because I contested it. And so she was like, wanted to prove that it was real. So I shouldn't have done that. I didn't know that it wasn't a big deal. It was a big deal to me because I don't know anybody that's ever that's happened to, you know? Like what entered my head was, what the hell kind of trailer trash would do that, you know? Would need that. Like, I've never known anybody who's fought enough to need something like that. As far as I know. Maybe it's possible. I guess it's more common in somewhere like Portland. But she's just trying to come up with money from her mom, man. You can actually tell though in the paperwork, because she said, I grabbed her on the wrist at a health food store. Well, there's people around it everywhere. So how violent could a person possibly be if that happens, you know? But she was required to make up something, or else she wouldn't be able to do it. Stupid. She did it to the boyfriend before me too. She was the reason I lost a bunch of friends on Facebook for the first time, because when I got together with her, they were like, she makes up lies about her ex-boyfriend. Like, you shouldn't be helping her. And then they told me, she's gonna do it to you. No, she's changed. Give her a chance. Whoops. All right, have a good night.